Hey traders, Francisco here with BalarezoCapital. In this video, we're gonna go through the market update. We're also gonna take a look at the weekly watch list. The purpose of this video is gonna be to create a high probability roadmap for next week and also to identify high probability setups so that we can find those opportunities. So if you're interested in that information, guys, make sure to stick all the way through this video. Before we continue with the video, guys, remember that this is for informational purposes only. It's based just on my personal opinion and it's not financial advice. And also, guys, if at any point of this video you find this information valuable, make sure to subscribe to the channel. That will help the channel a lot to continue to grow and build a bigger audience so that more traders can find this information and use it as an asset for their trading week. So the first chart that I want to take a look here, guys, is going to be the UBXY. And one of the reasons that I look at the UBXY is because the UBXY is actually an ETF that is tracking the VIX futures. And what I have found in my experience is that tracking the UBXY is much easier than tracking the VIX. And one of the reasons is because the VIX is a mean reverting asset. And basically, just in really simple terms, it means that most of the time the VIX is going to be trading in a range. So it's actually more challenging to find a price action that is really relatable to what we actually find in equities. But when we're looking at the UBXY, we tend to see these patterns a lot more clearly. And we tend to see more respect for the moving averages in an asset like the UBXY. So we tend to see these trend trading kind of patterns like an equity in the UBXY. So one of the things that I have found about the UBXY is that you can find some really nice information and create a really high probability thesis of when is that high volatility event coming. And I actually think that it's coming pretty soon. And I don't think that we're going to have a crash or anything like that, but probably we're going to see a pullback in the market, something more than a 1 or 2 day pullback. So one of the first things that I'm watching here in the UBXY is that we are having a lot of volume coming in. But most importantly, it's going to be these candles right here. And why these candles are important? These candles are important because, and if you're asking what type of candle I'm using the hollow candle right here in TradingView. So basically, these candles, since they are white, they are telling us that, hey, for the past 2 weeks, bears in the UBXY have been trying to open the price lower, but bulls have consistently been able to close the price higher. And that's why we have these white candles right here. So we have these white candles. You can see right here that we actually had a close above this anchor VWAP from the high, which has been acting as a level of resistance. And I'm actually thinking that as long as we continue to hold this 21 exponential moving average, basically these moving averages right here, and we continue to hold this anchor VWAP, I do see a scenario in which the UBXY wants to expand back above this 50 daily moving average. So that's something that I think is going to be really important for us to be aware of. And basically just watch the UBXY. If we happen to break below these moving averages, then perhaps the UBXY is going to continue to the downside. But if we happen to close back above this anchor VWAP next week and we close it above it, then perhaps we're going to see a really nice expansion in volatility, and then perhaps we're going to see a deeper pullback action in the SPX. So let's take a look at the SPX right now. And one of the things that I like looking at the SPX is going to be, as you know, guys, I always like to take a look at the gamma exposure. So let me just get that image right here. And what is really interesting about the gamma exposure, and this is the tool that I use from Gamma Edge. If you have any question about this tool, you can find the link of a video that I recently made here in the description, or you can find it here in the video. Now, what is really interesting about this tool is that it's gonna give you some really nice information as to what is the structure of the market in terms of the options positioning and what is actually the gamma structure. So basically, we continue to be in a gamma positive environment, and that means that we continue to trade above this box right here. So we can basically continue to hold this 5,120 level. We continue to have a really big target of 5,200, And if we go back to last week's video, the thesis that we created was actually, are we gonna tag that 5,200 level? We actually came pretty close. We went all the way to 5,185. We stopped. And now the question is that enough for the market? We have to keep a really open mind. This has been a really strong bull market. And now what I'm gonna propose here is gonna be really easy. If we continue to hold above 5,120, then perhaps we're gonna see a bounce to that level. If we happen to break below that level, then perhaps we're gonna see a deeper pullback. And if we take a look at the chart right here, this is gonna be really easy to see, right? You can see right here that the box is gonna be right above this 5,200 level that we're watching. And let me just get my tool. It's gonna be right above this 5,200 level, 5,120 level. And what is really interesting is that if you actually anchor a VWAP from this high and from this low right here, you're gonna see that we also have a really strong level of support right there. So I wouldn't be surprised if we actually happen to see a bounce in the market. Now the question is, how high is gonna be that bounce? Because this is a really strong selling candle that we had on Friday. Now the question is, if we happen to bounce, are we gonna tag that 5,200 level? That of course I don't know, but I think we can keep things really simple. If we continue to hold this 5,120 and we continue to hold these anchor VWAPs, then perhaps we have a chance to melt a little bit up into that 5,200 level. If we happen to drop below that, then watch below for a deeper pullback in the market. So the thesis for the market is actually pretty easy. I think that we can use the SPX kind of a guide for next week, and also the UVXY that we just discussed. So let's take a look at some of the setups I'm gonna be watching for next week, guys. So I'm actually leaning a little bit more bearish given the price action that we had on Friday. And it's not just the price action on the SPX, right? If we actually go to some of the key stocks like NVDA, we're gonna see that we had some pretty strong sell-off. It was a massive sell-off. I think we rallied all the way to 975 almost, and then we had a really strong sell-off. That's a really strong selling candle. Kind of the same action in AMD, kind of the same action in the SMH. So we can clearly see that we're starting to see a little bit more of a topping pattern in most of these leading sectors and some of the stocks. So I'm leaning a little bit more bearish, but of course that could change if we happen to hold that 5,120 level and then perhaps bounce a little bit. But if we happen to drop below it, then I think that these short ideas are actually going to pay off really nicely. So the first name that I'm going to be watching is Mara. And one of the reasons that I'm watching Mara, and I don't have a position just yet, because if we just take a quick look at Bitcoin, we're going to see that Bitcoin continues to trend to the upside. We actually, and this is actually pretty interesting, if we take a look here, you're going to see that we actually went right into 70,000 and we stopped to the dot at 70,000. So now the question is going to be, is that a top? I'm not really sure. I'm not trying to call it. I'm just seeing that we are starting to see a lot of divergence. Price continues to move to the upside. The indicator continues to move to the downside, the momentum indicator. So now is the question, right? Are we actually going to break this kind of wedging action that we're having here on Bitcoin, or we're going to continue to the upside? I don't know. I'm just waiting basically for a close below the previous day anchor VWAP, and then perhaps there's going to be a kind of a sell signal in Bitcoin, but nothing substantial right now. But I do think that if Bitcoin happens to pull back, I do think that Mara is going to be something that looks actually pretty interesting. I do think that we have a couple of levels. We have some anchor VWAPs here. We had some really strong level of exposure in terms of gamma at 25. So I wouldn't be surprised, right? Momentum is pretty negative. We continue to be below the moving averages. If we happen to have a pullback in Bitcoin and we happen to get a close of Mara back below these moving averages, then I do think that it's shortable at least to this 19.50 target, and then perhaps a little bit lower. But this is definitely a setup that I'm watching. So that's going to be for Mara. I'm also watching Google. And one of the reasons that I'm watching Google is because Google is in a downtrend, right? Google is in a downtrend. You can clearly see here that we continue to be below the moving averages. And as long as we continue to be below the moving averages, and my thesis that the SPY is actually a resistance holds, then perhaps we're going to get a really nice opportunity here in Google. Of course, perhaps we're gonna tag this 21 exponential moving average. But if we happen to come, then get a sell signal, meaning a close below the previous day anchor VWAP, then perhaps we're gonna see a continuation to the downside. That's gonna be it for Google. I do think that is looking bearish. Same is gonna be for Apple. You can see right here that we have some really strong sellers right here at this 21, at this 8 exponential moving average. Then perhaps Apple is just gonna flag here a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised, right, to see if Apple just flagging here a little bit before continuing to the downside. This is also a stock that is trending lower. I do have a PNW here. I would like it to be a little bit more near the moving averages, but then perhaps also an idea for next week. One of my favorite shorts is gonna be DIA, which is gonna be the Dow Jones. And one of the reasons is that we continue to be in a pattern of lower highs and lower lows. You can see that we had a high here, we had a lower low, then this low right here, we had a lower high, we had a lower low, and now we had a lower high, and this looks like a really interesting selling candle, to be honest. So then perhaps if we happen to have a rally in the market, then perhaps the Dow is gonna rally somewhere around here. I would like for it to continue to trade in this kind of lower lows, lower highs pattern, and then perhaps we're gonna get a really nice shot all the way to this 380 zone. That would be pretty interesting, and this is gonna be my favorite setup. And I'm also watching at the Qs. Of course, the Qs are gonna be a little bit more of a choppy pattern, but you can see right here that we are back in what I call what Gamma Edge calls the rotation zone. That means that as long as we continue to be in this box, we're gonna be kind of in a choppy range. But as long as we are not up here, then we're not gamma positive, and then perhaps the probability for a pullback is a little bit higher, perhaps the keys of this 50 daily moving average. So I'm just gonna keep the video pretty simple, guys. I do think that the market is showing some topping action based on the leading stocks that we have been watching, and especially the leading sector that is the SMH. But I do think that if you have the mentality of, hey, if the SPX is above 5,120, then perhaps we're going to see a little bit of a bounce. But if we happen to drop below that level and below the anchor VWAPs that we just mentioned, then perhaps we're going to see a continuation to the downside. And if you have a good watch list of stocks that are actually shortable, then you're just going to be fine. So that's going to be it for the video, guys. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. I will see you in future videos. Have an amazing Sunday. Take care, and bye-bye.